I was 72 years old when I finally admitted something I had been trying not to think about. I had $2,100 a month coming in. That was my retirement income. On paper, it didn't sound terrible. I wasn't broke. I wasn't sleeping in my car. I wasn't asking my kids for money. But every month felt smaller than the one before it. Rent, groceries, car insurance, prescriptions, electricity, little things around the house. By the time everything was paid, there wasn't much left. I could live. I just didn't feel like I was doing much living. So I made myself a deal. I would try the Philippines for 1 year. Not forever, not some big dramatic move where I sold every last thing and said goodbye to America for good. I gave myself 12 months. If I hated it, I could leave. If I got lonely, I could leave. If the money didn't work, I already had a way back. That sounded safe when I said it. What I didn't expect was that near the end of that year, going back would scare me more than staying. Before I left, my life in America had gotten very quiet. My husband had been gone for several years. My children were grown. They had jobs, families, schedules, problems of their own. I talked to them. I saw them when I could. We weren't fighting or anything like that. They just didn't need me every day anymore. Most mornings I got up, made coffee, watched the news, and tried to figure out what I was going to do until dinner. I started noticing how often I was staying home because going out meant spending money. I remember standing in a grocery store one afternoon with a package of salmon in my hand. I looked at the price, put it back, and bought chicken again. That sounds like a tiny thing, but I remember thinking, is this what retirement is going to be? Just getting better at saying no to myself? I had worked most of my adult life. I wasn't expecting luxury. I didn't need a big house or a fancy car. I just wanted some room. Room in my budget. Room in my day. Something to look forward to besides the next bill. The Philippines had been in the back of my mind for almost 2 years. At first, I watched videos because I was curious. Then I started writing down prices. Rent, food, transportation, health care, visa costs, flights. I didn't believe every video I saw. Some people made it sound like you could live like a queen for almost nothing. Other people made it sound like you'd be miserable unless you had $5,000 a month. I figured the truth was probably somewhere in the middle. My daughter thought I had lost my mind when I told her. She didn't yell. That almost would have been easier. She just stared at me and asked, "Why do you need to go all the way over there?" I didn't have some perfect answer. I told her I wasn't running away from the family. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was tired of checking my bank account every time I wanted to do something. That part she understood. The part she didn't understand was why the answer had to be the Philippines. To be fair, I wasn't completely sure either. I had enough savings to give myself some protection. I kept money set aside for emergencies. I didn't sell everything I owned. I stored a few boxes with family and got rid of things I didn't care about. And I booked a round-trip ticket because I wanted to know I had a way home already planned. The night before I left, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong. What if I got sick? What if I hated the heat? What if I couldn't understand anybody? What if I felt stupid at 72 years old for trying to start over in a country I had never lived in? Then another thought came in. What if I stayed exactly where I was and nothing changed? That scared me more. So I went. The first week in the Philippines was not some magical retirement commercial. I was hot, I was tired, I slept at the wrong times, traffic made no sense to me. I couldn't figure out why a short trip could take so long. I bought the wrong kind of phone load twice, and the first rental I looked at online was much nicer in the photos than it was in person. That was my first lesson. Don't fall in love with a place before you stand inside it. I ended up renting a small furnished place that was comfortable, clean, and close enough to what I needed. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen was smaller than what I was used to. The shower took some adjusting. I had one air conditioner that I treated like a member of the family, but the rent was less than half of what I had been paying back home. That got my attention fast. The first full month, I tracked almost every peso I spent. Rent, power, internet, groceries, rides, eating out, my phone, visa expenses, medicine, everything. When I added it up, I had spent around $1,450. I checked the number twice because I thought I had missed something. I hadn't. That meant I still had more than $600 left from my monthly income. I hadn't seen that kind of breathing room in a long time. I didn't suddenly become rich. $600 can disappear very quickly if something goes wrong. But for the first time in years, I could have lunch somewhere without doing math in my head before ordering. I could buy fruit because I wanted fruit. I could take a ride somewhere just to see something. That sounds basic, and it is. That's the point. For once, I wasn't thinking about money every time I left the house. By the third month, I had a routine. There was a small place where I liked getting coffee. The woman working there started remembering what I ordered. I found a grocery store I liked. I learned which days were better for errands and which times I wanted nothing to do with traffic. I started walking more. People would say hello. Sometimes we'd have little conversations that went nowhere, but I liked them anyway. Back in America, I could go an entire day without talking to anyone face to face. Here, somebody always seemed to be asking where I was going, if I had eaten, or why I was walking in the heat. I know some foreigners get annoyed by questions like that. I didn't. I liked being noticed. 3 months had already gone by. I still had 9 left, but I was starting to wonder what I was going to do when that year was over. Then, around month 5, the excitement wore off. That's when the real test started. The Philippines was no longer new. The heat wasn't interesting anymore. It was just hot. A power outage one evening left me sitting in the dark, sweating, wondering why I had chosen a country where I needed an air conditioner to feel normal. I got stomach trouble that lasted several days. Nothing serious, but when you're sick alone in another country, your mind can make it feel worse. I remember lying in bed thinking, nobody here really knows me. If I disappeared for 2 days, who would notice? That thought hit harder than I expected. I called my daughter. I didn't tell her how lonely I felt. I just asked about everybody at home. She told me about work, the kids, some problem with the car, normal life. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Are you still coming home when the year is up? I said yes. I said it so quickly that she laughed. But after we hung up, I sat there looking around that little rental and realized I wasn't sure anymore. A few weeks later, I met another American woman close to my age. She had been living in the Philippines for 3 years. We started talking because we were both waiting for something, and she asked how long I had been there. I told her about my 1-year plan. She smiled and said she had made the exact same plan. I asked what changed. She said, "Nothing big. That's why I stayed." I didn't understand what she meant at first. Then she explained that she had been waiting for some huge moment that would tell her whether she belonged here. It never happened. She just woke up one day and realized she had built a life without noticing. That stayed in my head. Because by month 7, little things were happening to me too. The coffee shop knew me. A neighbor brought me food one afternoon because she had made too much. I had someone I could call if I needed help. I knew where to go when I needed medicine. I stopped checking the exchange rate every morning. I wasn't visiting anymore. I was living there. And I only had about 5 months left on the deal I had made with myself. And that's when a new problem started. My life in the Philippines was becoming real at the exact same time my deadline to leave was getting closer. Month 9 was when I started thinking seriously about the decision. My lease was coming up. I had to either renew it or tell the owner I was leaving. I opened flight prices on my laptop more than once. Then I closed the page. Part of me missed America badly. I missed my family. I missed familiar stores. I missed driving my own car. I missed understanding every joke, every sign, every conversation around me. But I also remembered what life looked like before I left. I stayed home because I didn't want to spend $40 going out. I turned down trips. I watched my savings shrink every time something unexpected happened. I think I had been comparing the Philippines to the America I remembered, not the life I actually had there. That was probably the biggest change in my thinking. My daughter called again about 2 months before my year was up. This time she was more direct. She said, "Mom, if you come back, what are you going to do?" I laughed and told her I would figure it out. She asked where I would live. I said I could rent another apartment. She asked if I had checked prices lately. I had. That conversation got quiet. Then she said I could stay with them for a while. I appreciated it. I really did. But I knew what "for a while" could turn into. I would be living in someone else's house, trying not to get in the way, while paying more for almost everything else. For the first time, my daughter wasn't trying to convince me to come home. She was trying to understand what home meant to me now. I still wasn't ready to say I was staying. Then something very ordinary happened. One morning I went out for coffee. The woman behind the counter asked if I was going back to America soon, because I had mentioned it before. I told her maybe. She looked surprised and said, "But you live here." That was it. She went right back to what she was doing. I sat down with my coffee and stared out the window. "But you live here." I had spent almost a year calling this an experiment. Everybody around me had stopped seeing it that way before I did. I thought about my apartment, my groceries in the refrigerator, my clothes in the closet, the neighbor who waved when she saw me. Even the little routines I had complained about at first had become normal. This was not a vacation anymore. That didn't automatically mean I should stay. There were still things I didn't like. I missed my children. I worried about getting older so far away from them. Healthcare was something I thought about more than I did 10 years ago. I knew one bad medical problem could change everything. I wasn't going to pretend I had found some perfect retirement country where nothing bad happens. But I finally asked myself a better question. Not, is the Philippines perfect? It isn't. The question was, is my life better here than the life I would be going back to right now? For me, the answer was yes. A week before my lease ended, I renewed it. Not for 5 years, not forever, just one more year. When I told my daughter, I expected her to be upset. She wasn't. She said, "I figured you were going to." Then she asked when she should come visit. I nearly cried. I had spent months feeling like staying meant choosing the Philippines over my family. It didn't. My kids were still my kids. I was still their mother. I just wasn't going to spend the rest of my life waiting nearby in case they needed me. I'm 73 now. The $2,100 a month hasn't changed. I still watch what I spend, and I still keep emergency money set aside. Maybe I'll go back to America someday. I don't know. But I came to the Philippines thinking I was giving it 1 year. By the time that year was over, I had stopped counting the days until I went home. I wasn't ready to leave, so I stayed.